All right, we are on Unit 7, Learning Target 2, which is how the human settlement patterns have been affected by the culture, how the culture is affected by human settlement patterns, however you want to say that. So let's get started with the history. We're going to start with history, first with Central Asia. Many empires have influenced the culture of this region, which is a crossroads, and remember that word from a long time ago, between civilizations. And that crossroads was mainly influenced by the Silk Road, which is a vocab word. It was a series of trade routes that crossed Asia. It was the most important trade route in this region. The route was named for silk, a highly prized trade good from China. Many other goods traveled the route as well, including spices and fine china. At the western edge of the Silk Road were civilizations along the Mediterranean Sea and in Southwest Asia. The Silk Road connected these civilizations with China in the east. And here's a vocab word, caravans, which are groups of people traveling together. As they made their way through along the roads, they carried new ideas. Important technologies like papermaking and gunpowder made their way from Asia to Europe. Here's another vocab word, merchants, or traders, relied on the banks, markets, and inns in Central Asian cities. For hundreds of years, the fates of these cities were tied to the Silk Road. When trade was brisk, the region prospered. Great empires arose across the steppes of Central Asia. The vast grasslands allowed people to keep large herds of horses. Horses gave the nomads of the steppe a huge military advantage. Here's another vocab word, over sedentary or settled populations to the south. Nomad warriors created great empires that spanned Asia. On horseback, warriors swiftly swept down on their enemies, and armies on foot were no match for these mounted warriors. Because I don't know if you noticed that horses are much faster than humans. One of these groups were the Huns. They were an early group of nomads from the western steppe. They were skilled horsemen, and they conquered the Caucasus, and then they terrorized Europe. That sounds like fun. Attila the Hun, who was their most notorious leader, attacked the Roman Empire in the AD 400s. The Huns were likely a Turkic-speaking people, and at the time there were many Turkic tribes in Central Asia. By the 500s, these tribes dominated much of Central Asia. They controlled an area from Mongolia in the east to the Amu Darya River. Migration and conquest spread Turkic languages, and most of the main ethnic groups in Central Asia today speak Turkic languages. Let's see, and then Turkic and Persian states controlled Central Asia until the 1200s, and in the 1200s, we have this awesome guy named Genghis Khan who conquered the region and made it part of the Mongol Empire. The Mongol warrior Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes. He died in 1227, but his sons and grandsons continued to expand the Mongol Empire. At its height, they controlled much of Asia and Eastern Europe. Their empire reached east to Korea, west into Russia, and south to northern India. No empire before this empire was as large. Turkic tribes and descendants of the Mongol conquerors would vie for control over Central Asia for centuries until Russia took control over the entire region. And Russia, and then the Communist Soviet Union, took control over Central Asia and the Caucasus Mountains. Life changed greatly under communism. They divided the region into 8 Soviet republics or states. Under communism, I'll get this down here for you. Under communism, the government made decisions about economic production. Government officials told each republic what to produce. And in Central Asia, remember they were nomads? Well, they were forced to settle and work on government farms. But the government was not good at managing the economy well, and that resulted in lots of shortages of basic goods. All right, let's move on to South Asia and the history here. Since prehistoric times, people have migrated to the rich floodplains, and that's a vocabulary word, which is exactly what it sounds. It's the flat lands along the rivers that tend to flood. When the snow melts in the mountains, the rich soil is washed down onto the lowlands. And this fertile plain attracted early settlers. In time, civilization developed and cities rose. The Indus Valley civilization developed around 2500 BC and lasted for almost 1,000 years. Its cities were spread over a huge area in the Indus River basin. Here, as in other parts of the world, resources attracted settlement. Farmers in the fertile Indus flood plain grew wheat, barley, rice, cotton, and other crops. Traders set up networks to exchange goods. and soon Indus Valley products, goods, and ideas reached people in less advanced areas. In this way, here's a vocab word, the Indus Valley served as a cultural hearth, a place where civilization began and spread. The wealth of these cities also attracted invaders. Although the Himalayas were too high for armies to cross, newcomers found their way into the subcontinent through mountain gorges such as the famous Khyber Pass. These migrants spread across northern plains of the Indus and the Ganges. The newcomers blended with local peoples, forming a group we call the Aryans. Out of this union came a new culture, religion, and social system. The Aryan caste system, and that's a vocab word, is a social system that divides society into four main groups: the priests, warriors, farmers, and laborers. Priests were the highest caste, and those in the lowest caste were scorned and considered unclean. We'll talk more about that later. Other landforms also continue to shape this region's history. For example, the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan have created isolated communities. In both countries, fiercely independent tribes have long resisted government interference with their affairs. Today, governments still struggle with rebel forces in these same tribal areas. While mountains isolate some parts of South Asia, other areas have always been in contact with the wider world. Goods and ideas traveled from China to Europe along the Silk Road, and farther south, India lay at the center of the international sea trade routes. These trade routes brought immense wealth to the region. Indian cotton, pearls, and pepper from the Malabar coast were in worldwide demand. Sri Lanka exported cinnamon. Ancient Greek traders used the monsoon winds to sail quickly across the Arabian Sea to reach these goods. Merchants from distant lands sometimes settled in the trading ports. Meanwhile, South Asian merchants helped spread the religions and culture of South Asia to China and Southeast Asia. As you have read, or as I've said, the Himalayas didn't stop invaders from entering the region. Some of these invaders came to raid and conquer. Each set of newcomers changed the history of the Indian subcontinent, and in return, the region they invaded changed these newcomers. The cultural exchange began that continues today. The Muslim invasions brought the religion of Islam to South Asia. They also brought cultural influences from Persia and the Arab world. Despite much peaceful cultural interaction, growing diversity also creates tensions. This is a region of multiple faiths, ethnic groups, and languages. At times, the tensions lead to violence. However, the people of South Asia have also enjoyed periods of religious tolerance and cultural exchange. All right, let's move on to government. Remember, Central Asia was once part of the Soviet Union, so right now they face the task of overcoming political challenges. Some of these governments in the region are corrupt and undemocratic. When the Soviet Union collapsed, these countries were left on their own. Often people from within the Soviet government became leaders in the new countries. The leaders in the newly independent countries wrote new constitutions and laws that seemed to protect people's rights, but some of these leaders later acted to limit democracy. They tried to stay in power as long as they could. Elections are held in this region, but people may not have political freedom. One common problem is a vocab word called election fraud, and that is unfair elections in which one group controls the results in order to gain power. Often governments have not protected the rights listed in their constitutions. Many leaders have attacked or jailed people who don't support them. The government of Turkmenistan is one of the most repressive, that's a vocab word. Repressive means to oppose freedom. The president holds most of the power. In Turkmenistan, their first president extended his power until he died, and even now only one political party is allowed in Turkmenistan, and the press is not free to criticize the president. Can you imagine that in the United States, if people couldn't say bad things about President Obama? Anyway, in other countries, citizens have successfully protested against bad governments. In 2003, many Georgians joined a demonstration against election fraud in a parliamentary election. That's a vocab word. Demonstration is a public display of group opinion, which is often a rally or a march. Many people believed Georgia's president rigged the election so that candidates from his own party would win. The protests against this election came to be called the Rose Revolution, which is another vocab word, because demonstrators carried roses as a symbol of peace. The president resigned because of these protests, and the country elected a new president. However, across this region, progress has been uneven. In some countries, protests like the Rose Revolution have brought greater democracy. Still, the political systems of most countries are not open and democratic. All right, let's move to South Asia's government system. And you'll see some similarities between India and sub-Saharan Africa. During the Mughal period, the Portuguese, Dutch, British, and French set up trading ports. They came in search of spices, especially pepper, as well as cotton, silk, and indigo for dyeing cloth. The British government sent the powerful East India Company to act as its trading agent in South Asia. By the mid-1700s, the company had pushed its European rivals off most of the subcontinent. To protect its trade, the company took over some Indian states by force. It also tried unsuccessfully to control Afghanistan. In 1858, the British government took control of the East India Company's territories. Much of South Asia was now a British colony. It provided Britain with tea, coffee, grain, and raw materials such as cotton. Britain used Indian cotton to make inexpensive cloth for its factories. India's textile industry collapsed. Its craftspeople could not compete with the British-made cloth. Instead of exporting cloth and other finished goods, India became a market for those goods. In the early 1900s, a movement arose to force Britain out of India. Its greatest leader was Gandhi. You guys all know Gandhi. He organized boycotts of British goods and led protest marches. He urged nonviolent resistance or peaceful protest. Gandhi believed that a nation should not be built around only one religion or ethnic group. He called on Hindus and Muslims to unite as one nation. In 1947, Britain withdrew from India, but Muslims in the Northwest and Northeast feared that they would face discrimination if they remained in Hindu-dominated India. So, here's a vocab word. India was partitioned, or split into two states, and they are India and Pakistan. At the time, Pakistan was made up of two regions, west and east, with about 1,000 miles separating the two. Kind of like how the United States and Alaska are separated. We're still the same country, we just have, that place called Canada in between. With partition, a massive migration began. Millions of Hindus moved out of Pakistan into India, and millions of Indian Muslims moved into Pakistan. Many were massacred in an eruption of violence between ethnic and religious communities. In 1948, Gandhi himself was shot and killed by a Hindu extremist. Ever since partition, relations between India and Pakistan have been tense. Both countries claim the region of Kashmir. In 1947 and again in 1965, India and Pakistan went to war over Kashmir. India's prime minister during most of this time was Nehru. Nehru sought to modernize India. He also aimed to keep religion out of politics. In foreign affairs, Nehru forged a policy, and here's a vocab word called non-alignment. Non-alignment means India did not ally itself with either of the superpowers, the US or the Soviet Union, during the Cold War. They were neutral. Nehru died in 1964, and 2 years later his daughter, Indira Gandhi, became prime minister. She oversaw yet another war with Pakistan in 1971. The leading political party in East Pakistan demanded independence. The Pakistani government launched an attack on East Pakistan in March 1971. Some 10 million people, mostly Hindus, fled from East Pakistan into India. India helped East Pakistan gain independence, and in December 1971, East Pakistan became the nation of Bangladesh. Alright, let's look at their governments today. Because I know 1971 seems like ancient history to you guys. India is a representative democracy. People elect nearly all the members of one house of India's parliament or legislature. One member of parliament is then chosen as the prime minister. India is also, here's a vocab word, is a secular democracy, which is a democracy not based on religion, kind of like the United States. In other nations, religion defines the state. For example, the nations of Pakistan, formerly Afghanistan, and the Maldives are all Islamic republics, kind of like we saw in the Middle East. In Pakistan, the prime minister has to be a Muslim. After a coup by the military in 1999, an army general ran Pakistan for 9 years. The courts, the press, and the people all suffered a loss of rights. In 2008, civilians once more gained power. In Afghanistan, a lot has changed since 1971. The United States helped Afghanistan overthrow the Taliban in 2001. Afghanistan now has a constitution and holds elections. However, we're still in the right place. However, the central government is weak. The U.S. and its allies continue to send troops to maintain order. Bangladesh and Sri Lanka have had democratic rule for a long time, but their citizens don't always have the same level of rights and freedoms as they do in India. Nepal recently ended its monarchy and is now a democratic republic, and Bhutan also holds democratic elections. All right, now let's look at languages. Let's start with Central Asia here and the Caucasus region. There are a large number of languages that are spoken in the Caucasus. In total, more than 40 different languages are native to that region. Some of these languages are unique. They're not related to languages anywhere else on Earth. The reason for this diversity in language lies partly with the geography. People live in small villages that are separated by mountains. People in these villages were very isolated because it was before modern transportation like buses and cars. Settlers and conquerors brought new languages with them. Earlier local languages also survived in remote mountain villages. Many groups traveled across the Caucasus, which we said before it was the crossroads, which is a route between Europe and Southwest Asia. In addition, many empires, including Persians and Romans, invaded the Caucasus. These empires introduced new languages, customs, and religion. Greek-speaking Romans, for example, brought Christianity to Armenia and Georgia, and Armenia soon became the first state to adopt Christianity as its official language. To adopt Christianity as its official religion. As in the Caucasus, many different ethnic groups have settled in Central Asia. Tajiks are the largest ethnic group in Tajikistan, which is why it's called Tajikistan. The Tajiks speak a language that is closely related to Farsi, the language of Iran. The ancestors of the Tajiks were one of the earliest groups to control this region. Later, Arabs and Turks came to Central Asia. Arabs brought Islam to this region, and now most people in Central Asia practice Islam. The Turks left their influence on the languages spoken here. Most of Central Asia's major ethnic groups, including the Uzbeks, Turkmen, and Kazakhs, speak Turkish languages. These groups have different customs, but they are all descended from the many Turkic tribes that came here. Russians are one of the latest groups to settle in Central Asia from the Soviet Union, and as a result, many Russians made their homes there, and they learned to speak Russian. The leaders in the Soviet Union also wanted to unify the country, so they built many new schools. These schools taught in Russian instead of local languages, and the government wanted to control their cultural life. Here's another vocab word. It closed churches, mosques, and madrasas. Remember that from 2 units ago, which are schools that teach the Islamic religion. The culture also changed as many Russians moved into the region. The Soviet Union didn't allow religious freedom. Since independence, however, people built new churches, mosques, and madrasas. The Soviets also banned customs and celebrations connected to religion. Today, Christian and Muslim holidays are public holidays. Local languages and customs have also become important since these countries have become independent. Many schools now teach in local languages rather than Russian, and also people use local languages more often in public. All right, let's move on to religion. And there's some religions that were born from this region. And the first one is Hinduism. In South Asia, the Aryans' faith merged with local beliefs, and the result was Hinduism, the religion of most people in India today. The sacred texts of Hinduism are called Vedas, a collection of hymns and instructions. The Vedic text may date to 1200 BC, and later, between the years 300 BC and AD 300, many poems known as epics were also composed. The Hindus believe that there is one spirit that lives in all things. This spirit is called the Brahman, and it also takes the form of lesser gods and goddesses. More than 30 gods are mentioned in the Rig Veda hymns. Another principle in Hinduism is the idea that the human soul is eternal, so it lives forever. According to Hindus, when the body dies, the soul passes into a new body, and that's called, vocab word, reincarnation. So reincarnation can happen again and again in an endless cycle. For believers, reincarnation is also affected by karma, which is the collection of good and bad deeds of a person's life. Karma determines the kind of life that will follow when the soul has been reborn. To escape the cycle of rebirth, many become ascetics, or people who give up the luxuries of the world in order to try to live a spiritual life. The goal of the ascetic it was to achieve salvation by uniting the individual soul with the universal soul, the Brahman. The Hindu search for salvation encouraged the development of a new religion. In the 500s BC, a man named Siddhartha Gautama, how do you say that? Hold on. Alright, I looked it up. It's Gautama. He taught that all suffering is caused by desire. In other words, human beings get unhappy when they can't get what they want. Imagine that. In order to overcome desire, people must then follow a code of conduct. According to him, their goal should be to achieve nirvana, which is a state of understanding. Vocab word. It's a state of understanding that releases the soul from the cycle of rebirth. Gautama became known as the Buddha, or Enlightened One. His teachings developed into a religion known as Buddhism. Traders and Buddhist monks spread this new religion throughout Asia. Another religion, Jainism, also emerged in South Asia. The followers of Jainism, called Jains, believe that the soul can be perfected and purified in this world. One of the ways to reach this perfection is to practice ahimsa, or nonviolence, toward all living beings. So remember that the next time you squash a spider. Then our our second last religion here is Islam. Because India was such an important part of the international trade routes, travelers and merchants spread new ideas and religions, and that's how Islam first entered the subcontinent. Islam arrived in India in waves. The first came in the early 700s when Arab traders introduced Islam to South Asia. The new faith spread throughout in what is now Pakistan. Then in the 900s, Turkish Muslim kingdoms began to spread through Afghanistan. Afghan kings launched raids into India to seize the wealth that was stored in the Hindu temples. In the 1200s, one group of Muslim invaders established the Delhi Sultanate. This was a kingdom centered on the city of Delhi and was led by a Muslim ruler called a sultan. Muslims would rule much of South Asia for the next 600 years. However, Hindu rajas, or rulers, controlled kingdoms in South India. The arrival of Islam in a mainly Hindu region changed the history of South Asia. Hindus and Muslims were often rivals. Despite religious differences, however, there was a great deal of cultural exchange. And then our last religion is Sikhism. As Islam spread in the north, Sikhism was born. Most followers of the religion, the Sikhs, live in an area of North India called the Punjab. Okay, let's look at some of our conflicts, because it wouldn't be the world without conflict. Let's start with Central Asia. Different ethnic groups lived side by side in Central Asia. Before, Russian was a common language because it was part of the Soviet Union. Now, if one group's language is more widely used, the other ethnic group must learn this language. Also, some countries now have more than one official language. Both Kyrgyz and Russian are the official language of Kyrgyzstan. Still, minority groups are sometimes treated unfairly. Most of the ancient Central Asian Jewish communities have moved to Israel and America due to harsh treatment. In Uzbekistan, Tajiks have had a harder time finding jobs than Uzbeks. Some Tajiks claim to be Uzbek because they fear they will not be treated fairly. While the Uzbek government promotes Uzbek traditions, the Tajik people in Uzbekistan may lose their identity. Meanwhile, in Georgia and Azerbaijan, ethnic tension has led to armed conflict when minority groups have tried to break away and form separate countries. And then in South Asia, there was a civil war in Sri Lanka in 1983. A group of Hindu Tamils began fighting for a separate state. The war killed an estimated 70,000 people. In 2009, the government gained control of rebel areas and declared the war over. It's a long war. All right, in Afghanistan, the king was overthrown in 1973 and the country became a republic. 5 years later, a communist political party seized control. In response, rebellions broke out throughout the country. To support the Afghan government, the Soviet Union invaded. After a decade of fighting various Muslim rebel groups, the Soviet Union withdrew. One of the groups, the Taliban, took over Afghanistan. So now you also have to remember that the United States didn't like the Soviet Union, so they helped get the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan, and then the Taliban took over. The Taliban is the group that sheltered and supported Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the group that planned and carried out the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks on the U.S. That year, the U.S., Britain, and other NATO countries helped Afghans force the Taliban from power. Today, an American-led coalition is fighting Taliban rebels in the south and in the eastern mountains. But extremist groups like the Taliban can easily cross the Pakistani border to safe havens in the mountainous areas of northwest Pakistan. Political and ethnic conflicts often have a religious aspect in South Asia. In India, rivalry between Hindus and Muslims sometimes explodes into violence. In 2002, Hindu-Muslim violence in India's Gujarat province left more than 1,000 people dead. Tensions between India and Pakistan often threaten peace. The main cause of friction is Kashmir, an Indian state with a large Muslim population. In the past, Pakistan's government has backed Kashmiri groups fighting for independence. These armed rebel forces often clash with Indian troops. Now here's the scary part. Both India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons. So when tensions rise between these neighbors, the world holds its breath. Not literally, but you get what I mean. Okay, so that is it for Learning Target 2. Process your notes, do the summary, and I'll check in with you later.